Hello there. Today I'm taking a look at a Cru Bourgeois from Margaux in Bordeaux. So this is the 2019 vintage of a wine called Chateau Pontac Lynch. The estate, as I say, is classified as Cru Bourgeois and has maintained that classification through its various interpretations since 1932, when the Cru Bourgeois classification was first introduced. The estate sits plumb in between Chateau and Chateau Margaux, with Chateau Palmer sitting between it and the D2 road. So the soils here are a classic deep gravel over limestone, and the estate has a long history as well. It was established in 1720 when the Comte de Lynch built it as a hunting lodge for his family. During the 19th century, it was bought by a very famous family in Bordeaux, in Bordeaux's history, the Pontac family. It was the Pontacs who had originally established Haut Brion as the preeminent export wine in so many markets. So it's an estate that's been owned by many of Bordeaux's famous families. It's actually only a 7-hectare estate, and actually it was bought in 1952 by a family called the Bondon family. And René Bondon looked at the soils, felt that clearly this was a good site to be growing grapes that was unexploited, because at this stage this was primarily a dairy farm. So 4 generations of the Bondon family have worked to build the quality of the estate. I think it is generally seen as quite a good value for money example of Margaux. I think perhaps the fact that the chateau is only quite small, I mean 7 hectares is really quite small for the Medoc, means that it's not that widely distributed, and it's not hugely well known. Plantings in the vineyard have a slight dominance of Merlot. It's about 45% Merlot, 40% Cabernet Sauvignon, with 10% of Cabernet Franc and 5% of Petit Verdot. In 2013, they were certified for sustainable agriculture. Now, I believe, but I've seen different figures quoted, but I believe this is actually predominantly Cabernet Sauvignon, 65%, with 35% of Merlot and no Cabernet Franc or Petit Verdot. A couple of sources confirm that, so I think that's the most likely blend, though I've seen other potential blends. The fruit was hand-picked and carefully sorted, hand-sorted I'm assuming. Fermentation went on in temperature-controlled stainless steel tanks, and aging took place in French oak barriques, 50% of which were new. Aging went on for at least a year, and in some cases up to 14 months. I would guess that's a fairly standard way of handling a Bordeaux wine of this sort. So let's have a look at it, shall we, and see what we make of it. First thing to say, it's a wine with a pretty good depth of colour. It's a dark ruby red, holding its colour well to the rim. There's not a sort of a purple note or anything like that. I can see through it, but there's not an enormous depth in the glass, to be honest. I'm swirling it. Eventually it forms some tears, but the wine is only 13.5% alcohol, so it's certainly not the most viscous wine around. So let's have a look at the aromas, because let's face it, with the Margaux we're often looking for elegant, perfumed aromas of violet, and see if it's doing that. Perhaps because I'm looking for them, I can just about make out some of those lifted notes, but actually the more prevalent aromas here are a really sort of rich, ripe, plummy note. There are touches of cedar, and there are chocolatey aromas, chocolatey richness. I think ripeness is a lot more the impression I'm getting from this, which makes sense for the 2019 vintage, which was a good, ripe vintage. So perhaps hiding quite a little bit of that Margaux style, despite the fact there's a predominance of Cabernet Sauvignon, which should make the wine lighter and fresher. So let's taste. On the palate, that's instantly showing me what I'm looking for from Margaux. There's a lovely freshness. It's quite a light, elegant structure. Very fine tannins, very, very fine, supple structure. The flavours have a lovely, fresh, red plum note to begin with. Maybe a little bit of red currant, that's that sort of really quite sort of fresh crispness going with the fruit. There's a rich core, in some ways it's sweet licorice, in others it's chocolatey. There's a texture just to the tannins are so smooth. And there's sort of an almost graphite note, just the smoothness is certainly a graphite texture, but then the flavours are almost sort of a touch of graphite, and then they open up again and you see a little bit more of that sort of rich, fresh, plummy red fruit. The acidity is giving quite nice length to the wine. The alcohol adds a little bit of warmth, but it's not closing up the palate at all. It's allowing the fruit to come through. It's perhaps showing up a little bit of that sort of cedary spice that's coming through from the oak, but that's quite a delicate note, and at that stage it's providing a little grip once you're beyond the sort of the very smooth graphite texture that the wine currently has. It's a young wine. It doesn't seem hugely closed. I'm sure the fruit will open more with some time, but I guess 2019, quite a ripe vintage, quite accessible as a young wine. I think this is offering some really quite nice Margaux style. It's that sort of elegant Cabernet Sauvignon led note there that isn't giving great breadth, but is giving lovely long length and a freshness right at the finish. I was talking about notes of red currant at the start, and yes, it's that good acidity of that sort of red fruit, almost red currant, perhaps black currant, blueberry, those sort of, you know, quite sort of fresh acidities on a dark fruit. So yes, I think this is a really interesting wine. I suspect it would probably age for another 10 years quite happily, but at the same time, I don't think that it needs quite that long if you don't have the patience to wait for it. It's got that suppleness and smoothness that's making it very accessible now. It's got a nice primary fruit note. If you want more of a secondary aroma, yes, by all means, leave it in the cellar for 5 or 6 years and come back to it and see how it is then. But I think many of us would be hard pressed to keep that for a long time in our cellars. So thank you very much for watching. Hope you found this interesting. If you have, do please press the like button. Do consider sharing it with anybody you think might be interested in watching it. Please leave your comments. We'd love to get your feedback. Also, please consider following us on YouTube. That would be fantastic to have your support. But most importantly, I do hope you'll take the time to come and join us for another tasting in the very near future. Thanks again. Bye for now.